A happy Hump Day, Web Faithful, 1500ESPN.com and KSTP.com. My name is Darren Doogie Wolfson. This is beat reporter Tom Pelissero, 1500ESPN.com. Tom, if they don't win Sunday, they don't win at Chicago, they don't beat Green Bay, I'm not quite sure they win at Carolina. If they don't win Sunday, where do you find a win on this schedule?
Well, I think that we're beyond the point of looking at the schedule and saying what games they should or should not win, because I thought that they could beat Tampa. I thought they were catching them at a good time. They had a big lead in that game, they blow it. Detroit, I thought just based on their backs being against the wall that they'd probably get the Lions to get their best shot. They blow a lead in that one. Then the Chiefs, that's one of the worst teams in the NFL, and you lose to them. I honestly don't know, but you're right. You look at Chicago, Green Bay, those are tough games. It could be a while, and then at that point, there's going to have to just be changes, and there's going to have to be a change in the mentality that they still have right now that they somehow can turn this around.
Might we see some changes right now? Clearly, we're not going to see a change at the quarterback spot, but whether it's left tackle, some other positions, might we see some changes even this Sunday?
According to Leslie Frazier, they will make no starting lineup changes. Now, he said starting lineup changes. You don't know about other role players. You don't know about the possibility you could begin working some younger players in. I'll be interested to see if that backup group, that's the guys who've been inactive for basically 2-3 weeks here consecutively, if you might start seeing some of those guys come in. I think you have to look across the board. There's just, I wrote about it the other day. I think you would have finger pointing at this point if people had more fingers. There's a ton of problems.
Is it a matter of reality is starting to set in? I mean, you talk to numerous scouts, numerous people within the league. Everybody just about you talked to preseason said this is a fourth-place team, this is a 5- or 6-win team. Is that now coming to fruition? Well, is it tough for maybe some fans? I see you interacting on Twitter with plenty of fans, and they're not really able to accept the reality. But the reality is this just isn't a good football team.
No, and it's not I don't think it's a bad football team.
No, not at all.
They're not going to go 0-16 and not be 1-15. Everybody can talk about suck for luck all they want. I think this team will still win 4, 5, 6 games, but you're still talking about being one of the worst teams in the NFL. They're worse than I thought they would be. The beginning of the schedule, they had to steal 1 or 2. They had to win 1 or 2 of these games early on in the season to give themselves a chance. When you start 0-4, even if you go 500 the rest of the way, that's 6-10. That's not very good.
What else stood out from Leslie Frazier's news conference and Donovan McNabb's news conference? I was in the locker room.
Well, they talked about the fact that they did meet on Monday. McNabb said that he met with Frazier, he met with Bill Musgrave, he met with Craig Johnson, he met with all those guys, basically to clear the air about the direction that they're going in. He talked about it being more a schematic meeting. Frazier said he didn't ask, what's my role going forward? I think it's very clear. I don't think McNabb has to ask. If they lose a couple more games, the Vikings as a whole will have no choice but to go to some younger guys, begin those evaluations for 2012. But right now, even at 0-4, they're staying the course on this thing. And, from Leslie Frazier's perspective, as much as, yeah, this was never going to be a playoff team, I can see it from Frazier's perspective. He doesn't want this thing to begin spiraling down the drain, and he also doesn't want to be the guy who pulls the plug on the veteran quarterback after only 4 games, after telling Donovan McNabb, you're my guy, and telling him that throughout training camp.
How much blame does Frazier deserve? I mean, he was the guy that said, we're not rebuilding this thing. The word behind the scenes was Rick Spielman was on board with rebuilding, whatever that entailed.
He wanted to blow it up.
He wanted to blow it up in many ways. Now, maybe that would have meant re-signing Adrian Peterson, re-signing Chad Greenway, but in many ways, I was told that Rick Spielman is the one who was on board with sort of blowing this thing up. Leslie said, whoa, whoa, whoa. So how much blame does Leslie deserve?
Well, let's look around and talk about whether or not they blew it up. They didn't retain Ben Lieber. They went with Aaron Henderson. They didn't retain Pat Williams. They went with Remy Adele. They didn't, they cut Ryan Cook. They cut Jeff Dugan. They cut Heath Farwell. I would argue that they took certain steps toward that, and as you look at the guys they're going to be free agents next season, it's E.J. Henderson, it is Visante Shanko, it's McNabb, it's Berrien, all guys on the wrong side of age 30. I would say they've took that step toward the rebuilding process. It's more so been the narrative and the message that Leslie Frazier's taken into the locker room, which was this team could be good, even though if you look at the moves they made, even on cutdown day, they've already taken that first big step toward rebuilding this thing.
But why sign Michael Jenkins? Why sign McNabb? So, I mean, they kind of played it both ways, I think.
Yeah, they did. But I think that McNabb was the most significant one. With Michael Jenkins, he's not an old guy. He's 28, 29 years old, a valuable possession receiver, but he was never going to make up for what they lost with Sidney Rice. Yeah, I mean, there's different ways to slice it. If Sidney Rice resigns, Michael Jenkins probably isn't here. Bernard Berrien's certainly not here. They were going to approach it from a different perspective, but they also weren't going to get into that crazy $18.5 million that Seattle gave for Sidney Rice.
The Vikings made a roster move yesterday, cutting tight end Alan Reisner. Maybe he ends up back in the practice squad. Fullback Ryan D'Imperio elevated practice squad to the 53-man roster. Are they going to use a fullback now?
By the way, if you need any other sign they're rebuilding, the construction trucks that are moving dirt behind us, it's probably a good sign. I think that the key to remember is with bringing Ryan D'Imperio onto the roster, what they've been doing with Jim Kleinsasser, he played 30 to 35 what they call F snaps, playing a fullback type of a role. They'd also been doing a lot of H-back stuff in that last game, more than they had all season against the Chiefs. They probably had 10, 15, maybe even 20 snaps where they motioned a tight end into the backfield. What that does when you take Kleinsasser and put him in the backfield is he's not in line, and he's your best in-line blocker. Now you're putting Visante Shanko and Kyle Rudolph, who are inferior blockers at this point. Shanko will fight for you. Rudolph can't block anybody in line at this point. This puts Kleinsasser back on the line. I'll be really interested to see, though, what Ryan D'Imperio shows up, presuming that he's active on Sunday, which I think he will be, because D'Imperio in the preseason was pretty brutal.
I've been saying this for 3 straight weeks, but I think the Vikings win on Sunday. What about you?
I've said the same thing for 3 straight weeks. They've lost the benefit of the doubt with me. I think that Arizona has more on the line in this game. Arizona still is in a bad division. They still have a chance to win that division, even starting 1-3. They've got, I would say close to equal weapons. You're talking about Larry Fitzgerald. I think that he's, obviously one of the best receivers in the entire NFL. You've got Beanie Wells. You have Kevin Cobb, who I'm still not sold on being ever an elite NFL quarterback. I don't think he will be. I think he's a system guy. I think he's a West Coast type of system quarterback. But they have more on the line than the Vikings do right now. So yeah, if you look at the matchup on paper, you'd say those offensive tackles for the Cardinals are terrible. The Vikings' defensive end should be able to expose them all day. But when you're talking about the want to and which team needs this game more, I'd say it's Arizona. The Vikings already know they're done.
Excellent analysis from Tom Pelissero. Check out his work, 1500ESPN.com. Check out our work at KSTP.com and on Channel 5. Thanks for watching, everyone.